Tuesday is that time that Romany and we come to you with some issues that are affecting, I don't want to say the black community, it affects everyone, because we're all in this situation together. Well, unfortunately, Romany can't be with us right now. She will be joining us later on. Hopefully, I know there's some traffic and things in this area. So stand by. My partner in time may be here. But right now, it's me and the mastermind, TP Square. We're going to kick it around. We're going to talk about something I think that is very important, at least to the black community, and that is voting. So just Tuesday was election day across the country, and there were a couple of state houses, I'm sorry, up for bid, and there were a couple of initiatives on the ballot. I know in Ohio, Kentucky, and I believe Virginia, there was an initiative on the ballot. Basically, um, it discussed a woman's right to choose, the right to, I don't want to just say abortion, but I think it's, let's say, women's reproductive rights. And it seems that there are people across this nation that are hell bent on controlling birth, you know, um, and it seems that most of them are men. So if you can't have a child and you have no idea what a woman goes through when she's pregnant, carrying a child, why would you want to tell her when and where? I don't think that is something that a group of men that have no real concept of what it's like should be discussing. But, that's another issue. Um, what I want to talk about today is this last election. I was hell bent on sitting it out. I'm like, I don't know these people. I don't know what they stand for. I don't know what their policies are. And I really don't want to give away my vote and get nothing for it. I'm tired of doing that. I've done it for years. You know, um, like most black people across this country, registered as a Democrat and figured, oh, the Democrats will do something to assist the black community. You know, foolish way of thinking. But some of us still believe that if we hitch our wagon to the Democratic ticket, it'll take us somewhere. Well, where's it taking us? If you look back at our history in this country, in the years following emancipation, black people made some great strides. There were more senators in Congress then in the period known as Reconstruction than there are now. We built major economic centers like the Black Wall Street, Rosewood in Florida, and a host of others. We had established our own successful and thriving businesses. And I think what's most important is we had lots and lots of farmland where we could raise our own food, feed our own communities. Well, I was watching a documentary the other day about a black family in North Carolina. Um, on their farm is on the outer banks of North Carolina, really large piece of property, and right up against the beach. This property was bought by, I believe, their great great grandfather after emancipation. I think he has 67 acres down in this part of North Carolina. Over time, people, uh, the same people that taken Native Americans and indigenous people all around the world decided, well, you know what? We don't think he owns that land. We think that his documents may have been fraudulent. After this land had been in the family for, you know, generations, all of a sudden, now we're going to question the validity of these documents. And of course, they went after this property to seize it. And the family fought and is still fighting. Um, two of um, two of the family members have been told they had to leave the land, and of course they refused. So they were put in jail for trespassing. Trespassing is a minor offense. I mean, most people aren't arrested for trespassing. If you don't trespass with a weapon or with an intent to do harm, I mean, people just sometimes end up, realize someone else's property. These things can happen accidentally at times. Well, in their case, they were jailed for 5 years on the charge of essentially trespassing on their own property. Well, the point I'm making is that from the time of Reconstruction to now, the documentary showed that black people, black farmers, have lost 80% of the farmland that we once had. Let me say that again, 80%. So that means we now control a mere 20% of the land that we once had. Um, and of course, when the Farm Bureau was created, they didn't, their policies did not have black folks in mind. The loans that were given out for farm equipment, seed, and other things really went to black farmers. So eventually, they just had to give up the land and move into other, endeavors. But now that we're facing, a crisis in this country, food shortages, prices skyrocketing, we no longer can go to the land to feed ourselves. And these are policies that both parties, which I think really realistically are one party for the most part, are aware of and did nothing, and yet constantly count on us to cast our vote for one particular party. So a lot of us are going to the polls year in and year out, and we're going down one particular party line. We don't know these people, we don't know what their policies are, but because I'm a member of Party X, I'm going to go right down, I'm going to vote right down Party X's line. Some of these folks that we vote for have been in office 10, 20, 30 years, sometimes longer. Some of these folks, are dying in office. I mean, God rest her soul, Dianne Feinstein was elected in the 70s, and she essentially died in office. So you have people that have been there for 50 years that are no longer effective. And we wonder why things don't change. Well, the definition of insanity is when you do the same things over and over and expect a different result. So basically, we go to the polls year in, year out. We vote for the same exact people. We keep sending them back, even though their policies are hurting the American families, the American people, even though they're not effective anymore. And worst of all, they're not listening to a damn thing we have to say anymore. Doesn't matter. We go back and put them right back in office time and time again. And we think that we're actually doing something. So we think that we're hurting the other party. So if you go to the polls and you're a Republican and you vote right down the Republican line, again, people you don't know, people who are ineffective, people don't listen to anything you have to say and care less, well, you think you're hurting the other party, but are you? Politics is kind of like professional sports. You watch basketball, the Knicks playing, say, the Celtics. The Knicks go down and score. What do? You give the ball over to the other team, and now it's their turn. And the same thing can be said of politics. Okay, so the Democrats may be voted out 4 years, 8 years. They're not going anywhere, folks. Eventually, the tide will turn and the Democrats will be right back. Maybe control of the White House and both houses of Senate. Did you hurt them? No. How are you going to hurt somebody? Think for a second. How are you going to hurt someone who, after one term in office, is entitled to a pension, lifetime health care at some of the best facilities in the country? So how are you going to hurt them? You're the one that doesn't have insurance or health insurance. You're the one that's struggling to pay your bills, not these clowns up on Capitol Hill. Most of us are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. And most of us are spending more and more time away from our families at work. These clowns up on Capitol Hill, they're always out for some recess, summer recess, winter recess. How many days a week do they actually work? And what are they doing? They tell you, oh, we're fighting for you. Well, listen, folks, in a fight, people lose. And you know what? They've been losing. And the American people are losing badly. If you look at the American people, you think of it in terms of a fight, we got the hell beat out of us. It looks like we've been fighting Mike Tyson. And, these people keep telling us that they're fighting. Well, stop using that phrase. It's old, it's antiquated, and it don't even count anymore because I'm doing a damn thing. Recently they wanted to shut the government down, and we still may have a government shutdown. I believe it's on the 19th. Of course, they're going to get their paychecks. Congress will be paid. Make no mistake about it. The people who work hard every day, that can barely put food on the table and keep a roof over their head, are not going to get their paychecks. So are you really hurting these folks when you vote in the other party? Anyway, the point I wanted to make today is I am cognizant of the fact that our ancestors fought tooth and nail for the right to be part of the political process, to be able to go in, to be able to cast a ballot, to walk into your polling place, not be harassed, not be threatened, and to just cast your ballot. It was a long, hard-fought battle, and many of our ancestors died. So I'm cognizant of that. But my question I like to ask people, I'm going to open up the phone lines, and I like to hear what people think. But my question to you is, for our ancestors that died, who fought tooth and nail for this right, which isn't even right, it's more of a privilege, because this privilege has to be re-ratified every now and then. Anyway, my question is, did our ancestors die for us to have a choice of Donald Trump or Joe Biden? Or was their thinking more like, we want to see more people that look like us, that understand us, that know our struggles, our condition in office? So were ancestors fighting for us to get into these key positions, or was it simply just to vote? And that's, I think, is a very important question. I think that when we go to the polls, we should have an agenda. And we should understand that, yes, voting, it is important, but what do you hope to accomplish with your vote? And also go there with the idea that, yes, you're going to honor and pay homage to our ancestors, but by voting for these two older gentlemen, and it's kind of a race to determine who's more senile than the other, is that what the ancestors envisioned? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? Is that what we're supposed to be voting for? And I don't know about you, but I just think that the voting system in this country, our electoral process, like so many of our senators and members of Congress, old, antiquated, and outdated. We need a new system, and we need new blood in Washington. Someone with some new ideas, some new thoughts that can take this country in a new direction. Because the direction we're headed in now, definitely destructive. So I'm going to open up the phone lines. The number here is area code 888-304-4401. Again, 888-304-4401. Give us a call and give us your take on this question. Did the ancestors want us to choose between somebody like Donald Trump and Joe Biden, or did they envision us, people of color, getting in key positions so we can kind of lift our people out of the conditions that have been placed upon us for 400 years? So, like I said, give us a call and let us know what you think. As I was looking at the debate last night, the Republican debate, to be quite frank, it really turned my stomach to hear five people, get up there on a debate rostrum and to just, it seems as if they're trying to run to the right of Donald Trump. Everybody's trying to out-Trump himself. There's one interesting fellow, Vivek Ramaswamy. He said, when asked about the situation in Gaza, he said he would tell Bibi, or the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, that he should go on basically and finish Hamas. And he said while he is in the middle of finishing Hamas, that under a Ramaswamy administration, he would be finishing the people entering this country along the southern border. So to this individual, Vivek Ramaswamy, whatever his name is, did you just get on national TV in a debate and threaten to commit acts of murder against people who are entering this country, albeit illegally? Did you just threaten to kill people? I mean, and the others kind of signed off on, all of them said that they would tell the Prime Minister of Israel to continue with the war. First of all, let's be clear, there is not a war. A war would require two enemy combatants meeting on the field of battle.
Exactly.
That is not what is happening in Israel. Israel has launched an assault on Gaza. Gaza does not have an army. Gaza does not have anywhere near the equipment that Israel has. They are not a match for Israel. And let's just look at the terminology used. When this attack occurred on October 7th, we were told that Hamas was firing rockets into Israel. This is 2023. Who still fires rockets? That is World War II technology. Okay, maybe this is technology that has been improved somewhat, so it's still technology that was outdated since the 80s. Israel is firing missiles, guided missiles that can come within maybe 100 yards of its intended target. So there is no, Gaza is no match for Israel. And if you think that, then you really should consider psychiatric care. If you look at some of the old footage from the intifadas or uprisings, you'll find people throwing rocks at tanks. If they had mortars or RPGs that could, blow up a tank, don't you think they would use those as opposed to rocks? And these are the people that are called terrorists. Now let me ask a question. In South Africa, Nelson Mandela and the group he represented, the ANC, was called a terrorist organization. Even in this country, Nelson Mandela was on a terrorist watch list. Nelson Mandela, after 27 years of being in prison on Robben Island, became the president of South Africa. So my question is, was Nelson Mandela and the ANC a terrorist organization? In Ireland, you had the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, who fought the British. The British government said they're terrorists. Were they? Were they defending their homeland? Or were they terrorists? The definition of a terrorist seems to have changed over the years. A terrorist was one who sought to place others in fear by acts of violence. Well, today it seems that the people who are fighting back against those who attack them, the people who are attacked are the modern terrorists, not the people who built up arms, who took their land, the people who kicked them off their own land out into some of the worst areas of the country or the world. No, they are the good law-abiding citizens, the people who are struggling every day to survive, like the people in Palestine, they're the terrorists. It's kind of like what happened in this country. If you look at the westward expansion, when Europeans began to traverse across this nation from from the east coast to the west coast, they encountered indigenous tribes. And of course, books were written and movies were made. And it shows, of course, that the Native Americans, the indigenous people, sometimes called Indians, were the terrorists, the red devils, the savages. Now, according to history, when Columbus arrived into what he called the New World, there were people who met him on the beach, indigenous people. So, how do you discover a place where people have been living for centuries? Then, of course, there are stories where Columbus and his men could not have survived in this hemisphere had it not have been for the assistance of the indigenous people. Same thing with the Pilgrims who landed in Massachusetts in Plymouth Rock. They tell you in their writings that the Indians showed them what food to grow, how to fish, how to hunt. They taught them how to survive the harsh winters in the Northeast. And of course, the Europeans paid them back handsomely by slaughtering them and taking their land. And of course, again, Indians or the indigenous people, they were the terrorists. So I guess we're saying that Nelson Mandela and the ANC, who were only fighting to protect the little bit of land that they had left. If you know anything about South Africa, when the Boers came, who were, I guess, a mixture of Dutch, German, and English, when they came to South Africa was a storehouse of so much wealth, diamonds, gold, and so many other precious commodities. Well, one of the first that came to Southern Africa was a man by the name of Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes comes down into Africa, Southern Africa, and kills so many people he decides to name the country after himself. There was a country called Rhodesia for many years. The name has been changed now to Zimbabwe, but for years it was Rhodesia, named after Cecil Rhodes. He wanted to expand the British Empire, and he comes down to Africa, sees all of the material wealth, and said, "Oh, we're going to take every bit of this." And they tried to. To this day, wealth is being siphoned out of Africa, going to places like Europe and into this country. Well, Cecil, I guess, had a little bit of, I don't know, maybe an epiphany where he said, "You know what? I've taken so much from the land of Africa. Maybe I should give a little something back." So today we have people who are called Rhodes Scholars who go to college off some of the money stolen by Cecil Rhodes. Some of the most notable people like Bill Clinton, a Rhodes Scholar. I believe Bill Bradley, also a Rhodes Scholar. Well, these Europeans came down, killed everything that was darker than them, and established footholds in Africa, and then began to extract Africa's mineral wealth. And of course, those who fought back, well, they became terrorists. There's one story, I believe it was Shaka Zulu. He was confronted by I think it was a British general. I don't remember his name right now. But they told Shaka, if you don't lay down your arms, you will face hellfire. And Shaka's reply was, "Oh, listen, man, we eat hellfire." and we're not laying down our arms. History has been kind of cloudy when it comes to Shaka Zulu. You know, when you win the war, you get to tell the story in your own way. And of course, nobody is there to refute the story that you tell. And in this country, as it relates to what's going on in the Middle East, all of the major news outlets are in support of not Israel. Let me make this clear. It's not Israel. We're talking about Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel is a divided nation, just as we are in this country. There are many people, Jewish people in Israel, who do not support Netanyahu's further incursions into Gaza. They have said enough is enough. And they are fighting and marching and demonstrating along with the Palestinians. They said they stand in solidarity. Like here in this country and other places around the world, there are small groups of right-wing extremists who take control of the country and who push the agenda to the right, the hard right. And the people suffer for it. For Israel has lost a great deal of the world's favor. Many, many countries are now speaking out about Israel's aggressive tactics in Gaza. And for Benjamin Netanyahu, he refuses, or thus far has refused, a ceasefire, even for humanitarian purposes. As little as hours, he's saying, well, no, we need to root out every Hamas fighter. Well, how do you differentiate between who is Hamas and who is just the average Palestinian living in Gaza? As I said, Hamas is not an army. They do not wear uniforms. So how do you tell who's who? So far, I believe nearly 10,000 Gazans have been killed. Many of them children. Were the children members of Hamas? There was a hospital that was bombed. We had elderly and critically injured and very, very sick people. Were they members of Hamas? They said they discovered tunnels underneath, the infrastructure in Gaza. You mean to tell me the Israeli army and their intelligence gathering apparatus didn't know those tunnels were there? If they didn't know, how come Hamas, if that is who is behind this attack, didn't do this earlier? Why would they wait for more and more land to be taken and for them to be down to a mere 25-mile strip of land when Palestine was a vast nation? Why would they wait that long if they had tunnels running underneath Gaza where they could have defended themselves? Does that make sense? Well, according to our media, it does. And they're trying to convince us that, Hamas is this awful group of people, these terrorists, that are attacking poor, defenseless Israelis. And thus far, I believe 1,400 Israelis died on October 7th. Yes, it is a tragedy. Any loss of life is a tragedy. The problem is we try to place value on people's lives. Some have greater value, some have lesser value, some have no value. Make no mistake about it. Some people, their lives have zero value. Because if they did, something would be done to stop the senseless slaughter. In this country, we have people who are homeless, who are living on the street, and people walk by them every day. And no one really cares when they come up missing. In this country, how many children are missing? How many women, particularly Black women, are missing and nobody's looking for them anymore. How much is their life worth? So, yeah, we place value on human life. And until we get over our sickness, we're always going to find ourselves engaged in these kind of sick battles, like what we're seeing in Gaza. You know, people always say that Israel has a right to defend itself. And I would go a step further and say, yes, they do. And they also have an obligation to defend the people of Israel. I think every nation has that right. My question is, do Palestinians also have the right to defend themselves? And if so, how? How do they do that? When their economy is controlled by Israel. Most people in Gaza don't have, as I said, they don't have an army, no navy, no air force. Just what we're told is a group of so-called terrorist fighters who fight Israel with outdated, antiquated military technology. How do you fight Goliath, the modern day Goliath, with a slingshot? Somebody got to explain that one to me. And if you are David fighting Goliath, and Goliath has come to hurt you, to assault you, why are you the terrorist? But anyway, I know that's a bit of a departure from what I was initially saying. But yeah, I just want to know about the issue of voting in this country, because those issues, Israel, Ukraine, are going to be major issues in this upcoming presidential election. America keeps sending more and more money to Ukraine to fight a war that apparently Ukraine cannot win. And now we just put together an aid package to go to both Ukraine, Israel, and I believe there's some earmark for Taiwan. So if the wars in Ukraine and Israel aren't enough, now we want to send money to Taiwan, which will only inflame tensions with China. I think that what we have in this country, running this country, are neocons and warmongers who've never met a war that they do not like. They can't agree on anything. Can't agree on health care. Can't agree on Social Security. Can't agree on what brand of toothpaste to buy. But as soon as somebody says war, everybody says where. I agree. How much do we need to send? We now have, I think, 6 or 7 naval vessels in the Red Sea. Unless I'm mistaken, the people in Gaza don't have a navy, don't have an air force. Why this overwhelming firepower for people that don't have any way to defend themselves? Are we really going after Hamas? If you've been watching the news and paying attention, all of a sudden now, Iranian-backed militants are firing at our troops in Iraq and Syria. Now, why would all of a sudden Iranians start antagonizing U.S. troops? Think about it. Why would you wait till the ships are parked off your harbor to start some mess? Wouldn't you do that before all the crew showed up? No, but Iranians are stupid. Like, everybody around the world is stupid except us. So yeah, they waited for, the police to come, and then they started the fight. Really? Folks, if you're watching, I don't care what media outlet you're watching, there's a scene in Malcolm X when Malcolm is still in prison. And Brother Bain is trying to enlighten Malcolm. And he said, Malcolm, you need to go behind the words. You need to understand, you need to look at something and then understand the agenda behind it. Understand what's really being said to you. Have knowledge of what's going on. Because if you do, they can't tell you these fantastic stories that make absolutely no sense. But this is the nonsense that they feed us day in and day out. And what's crazy is there's a 24-hour news cycle. And in that 24-hour period, they're telling you the same story over and over and over. And what's crazy is there are people who are watching the same story just told by a different person over and over and over. Folks, don't think for one second that before they go on air that there's not like a pre-production meeting where they decide what they're going to talk about and who's going to say what. You think all these folks are just in lockstep? No. These folks you see on Fox, CNN, HLN, whatever you watch, these people are paid very well to lie to you, to tell you whatever the corporation once said. So, folks, I just wanted to drop that on you. And, next year, this time, we're going to have a presidential election. And so far, it looks like it's going to come down to a rematch of 2016. Well, we all know what happened after the last presidential election. We saw what happened on January 6th when thousands of angry, frustrated people rushed the nation's capital. Well, since that time, the anger has grown, the frustration has multiplied. Don't think that it's over. For Donald Trump has been quietly raising hundreds of millions of dollars. He's out earning the people who are actually out on the stump. He doesn't show up at any of the debates because he doesn't have to. While they were debating last night in Florida, not far away was Donald Trump holding a rally. And there are arguably more people, a lot more people at his rally than there were inside the auditorium to hear the debate. It seems as if all the stops are being pulled out to keep Trump off the ballot. There was an initiative to have him kicked off the ballot in Minnesota that just failed. But there's some other states that have a similar initiative to keep Donald Trump, off the ballot. I don't think it's going to work. And I think that it is very feasible that Donald Trump can win the office again. And unless Biden and his team can figure something out, it is quite likely that we're going to see Donald Trump being inaugurated again in 2025. Folks, this is a really dangerous time in this country. Very serious time. And if you're still kind of, living in la la land, well, you may not have time to wake up and understand and appreciate everything that's going to happen. But this country, like so many others, is a powder keg, just waiting for the spark. So many people angry and frustrated, so many people hurting and being ignored by their own government. You see homeless people, going back to homeless people for a reason. Typically, they're just there. They don't bother anybody. They might ask for $1 or two. Typically, they don't bother you. But lately, there's been those who are so frustrated of not being heard, not being seen, that they're attacking. And just like people in this country who for years have not been heard, have not been seen, who have been ignored, eventually they will attack as well. So, folks, I just want you to think about that, as you make preparations for next year when it's time to have this election or hold this election. I want you to think about these two guys, Biden and Trump. Are there differences? Yes, there are clear differences. Trump has shifted the party not to the right, but has reshaped the party into the party he wants it to be. And his priorities are the priorities of the Republican Party. Now, look, I don't care what party you choose because it really doesn't matter. What matters is us, the American people. What is it we want? And if we think one of these two guys are the savior of America, then clearly we're suffering from some serious form of psychosis. So, folks, I see our next show is preparing to come on. I see my man Strategies out there. And, I could go on and on, but I think you get the point. I hope you do. And I know you're ready for some good music and a good topic as well. And I won't be here next week. I'll be away, take a little vacation, get a little sunshine, some warmth. But I hope to see you again very soon in the near future. Hopefully, my partner in time will be back, Roman A. And we can again discuss some very serious issues because when I say Thoughtful Thursday, that's what I mean. Thoughtful Thursday. Take the time to think, not just react. Take the time to think. Take a step back and look at what's really happening in this country, on this planet, and understand how serious these times are. So with that, I'm going to say good night, and I'll see you soon.